March 2nd, 1943. 1400 hours. Bismarck Sea. Captain Sato Yasuo gripped the bridge railing of the destroyer Asashio as B-17. Flying fortresses appeared high above, their bomb bay doors already open. But this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring something far worse: modified bombers that would come in so low their propellers would leave wakes across the water, releasing bombs that would skip like stones toward his ship. 25 seconds. That would be all the time they would have from release to impact. 25 seconds to watch death bounce across the waves toward them. The mathematics of destruction had already been calculated by men like Major Paul Pappy Gunn in Australian aircraft depots, where he had transformed B-25 Mitchell bombers into flying gunships. Each plane now carried up to 14 forward-firing 50-caliber machine guns, turning them into instruments of unprecedented naval destruction. The convoy commander, Rear Admiral Kimura Masatomi, had wargamed this operation with his staff at Rabaul, predicting 50% losses. His staff had called those estimates pessimistic. They were about to discover he had been optimistic. The convoy had departed Simpson Harbour, Rabaul, on February 28, 1943. 8 destroyers, escorting 8 transports, carrying 6,900 troops of the 51st Division, desperately needed at Lae. They had chosen a route along New Britain's north coast, hoping storms would shield them. For 2 days, the weather cooperated, but on March 1st, a patrolling B-24 Liberator found them through a break in the clouds. The countdown to annihilation had begun. March 2nd brought the first attacks. B-17 seconds from the 43rd Bomb Group struck from 7,000 feet, their bombs falling like sledgehammers from the sky. The Kyokusei Maru took a direct hit and began her death spiral, but destroyers rescued 950 survivors. This was conventional warfare, the kind the Japanese had trained for. They could evade, maneuver, survive. Tomorrow would be different. That night, as the convoy approached the Vitiaz Strait, mechanics at Port Moresby were loading 500-pound bombs into the modified B-25 seconds of the 3rd Attack Group. These aircraft bore little resemblance to the medium bombers that had rolled off North American Aviation's assembly lines. Pappy Gunn had gutted them, removed the bombardier's compartment, and packed the nose with machine guns. Package guns hung from the fuselage sides. Some carried as many as 18 forward-firing 50-caliber guns. They had practiced for weeks against the wreck of the SS Pruth, perfecting the approach angles, speeds, and release points for skip bombing. The physics were elegant in their lethality. A 500-pound bomb, released at 200 feet altitude while traveling at 250 miles per hour, would strike the water at approximately 15 degrees, once or twice depending on wave conditions, and slam into a ship's hull at the waterline. The delayed fuse, 4 to 5 seconds, would carry the bomb through the hull plating before detonation. The explosion, contained within the ship's structure and magnified by water's incompressibility, would tear the vessel apart from within. March 3rd, 0930 hours. The weather cleared over the Huon Gulf. The convoy, now within range of every Allied aircraft in New Guinea, steamed desperately toward Lae. Admiral Kimura knew what was coming. Radio intercepts suggested the Americans had been tracking them since they left Rabaul. But duty demanded they continue. The soldiers packed in the transport's holds were veterans of the China campaign, desperately needed to stem the Allied advance in New Guinea. At 1000 hours, the coordinated attack began. First came Australian Beaufighters of No. 30 Squadron at mast height. Squadron leader Keith Bluey Truscott led the attack, his 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns raking the deck of the Teo Maru. The Japanese ships, thinking these were torpedo bombers, turned bow on to present smaller targets, exactly what the Allies had anticipated. Behind the Beaufighters came the B-25 seconds of the 90th Bomb Squadron, 3rd Attack Group, so low their prop wash churned the ocean surface. Major Ed Larner, commanding the 90th Bomb Squadron, pushed his B-25 down to wave height. Where a bombardier once sat, 4 50-caliber machine guns now protruded from a solid metal nose. His crew called out distances as they approached a large destroyer. At 600 yards, Larner opened fire. The forward guns erupted simultaneously, each spewing 850 rounds per minute. The converging streams of tracers looked like solid bars of light stretching across the water. The destroyer's anti-aircraft gunners tried to respond, but the hurricane of bullets swept across their positions. Men dove for cover as 50-caliber rounds punched through steel plates, shattered glass, and tore apart anything in their path. At 300 yards, Larner released his bombs. They dropped just feet from the aircraft, struck the water, bounced high into the air, skipped again, then slammed into the destroyer's hull. Larner pulled up hard, engines screaming as the B-25 climbed to clear the ship's superstructure. Behind him, his crew counted down the delayed fuse. The explosion blew out the ship's side. Seawater rushed through a hole large enough to drive a truck through. The vessel listed immediately, its fate sealed in 25 seconds. Captain John Jock Hennebury, flying on Larner's wing, watched his commander make that first successful skip bombing run. When everybody saw him make that pass and hit it with at least one and maybe two and the explosion, that just ignited the whole thing. The guys got the idea if he could do it, they could do it. The psychological barrier was broken. The 90th Squadron's B-25 seconds swarmed over the convoy. Flight Officer Yoshio Oishi, leading Zero fighters from Leh, dove to intercept the B-25 seconds. But the bombers flew so low that attacking them meant flying through the convoy's own anti-aircraft fire. The American tactics had turned Japanese defenses against themselves. When Oishi finally got a clear shot at one B-25, tracers from the destroyer Arashio, trying to track the American bomber, stitched across his Zero's fuselage. His plane cartwheeled into the sea, killed by friendly fire, while trying to protect friendly ships. The Kembu Maru, loaded with desperately needed aviation fuel, became the next target. A B-25 came in at 240 miles per hour, machine guns blazing. At exactly 325 yards, the pilot released. The bomb skipped twice, each bounce precisely calculated, and struck the fuel tanks. The explosion vaporized the ship. A pillar of fire rose 500 feet into the air. Men on nearby ships felt the heat wash over them like a furnace door opening. Within 90 seconds, nothing remained but burning oil spreading across the water. Admiral Kimura watched from the bridge of his flagship Shirayuki as his convoy disintegrated. These weren't random attacks, but precisely orchestrated destruction. The Americans came in waves, from different angles, at different altitudes. While his gunners engaged B-25 seconds at wave height, B-17 seconds from the 43rd Bomb Group dropped 1,000-pounders from 7,000 feet. While destroyers maneuvered to avoid skip bombs, a 20 Havocs of the 89th Squadron strafed their bridge crews. The three-dimensional battle overwhelmed every Japanese defensive doctrine. Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi, commanding the 18th Army, stood on the destroyer Tokitsukaze's bridge, watching his reinforcements die. Through his binoculars, he could see soldiers on the transport decks, some trying to man anti-aircraft guns, others preparing to abandon ship. A B-25 approached the Ayo Maru at wave height, its nose lit up with muzzle flashes. The bombs skipped across the water with mechanical precision. 25 seconds later, the Ayo Maru broke in half. The modification of the B-25 seconds represented American industrial adaptation at its finest. In peacetime, such changes would have required years of testing, committees, approvals. Pappy Gunn had done it in weeks with salvaged parts and mechanical genius. He had removed unnecessary weight, the bombardier position, the ventral turret, and added firepower. The nose guns were fed by ammunition tracks that ran along the fuselage. The package guns were mounted on special reinforced hardpoints. Some B-25 seconds carried a 75mm cannon adapted from a tank that could punch holes through destroyer armor. The B-25 seconds of the 38th Bomb Group's 71st and 405th Squadrons joined the attack, demonstrating the devastating effectiveness of these modifications. Approaching the Oyegawa Maru, one pilot triggered all 14 forward guns simultaneously. The recoil slowed the B-25 by 10 miles per hour. The sound was not the staccato of individual guns, but a continuous roar. Tracers created a cone of death that swept across the transport. The bridge windows exploded, the radio antenna disintegrated, and anti-aircraft positions fell silent. 2 bombs released in sequence both skipped perfectly, hitting amidships and near the stern. The Oyegawa Maru jackknifed and sank in 4 minutes. The Japanese had prepared for conventional attack patterns. Their manuals covered torpedo bombing turned bow-on to present a minimal target. They addressed dive-bombing radical evasive maneuvers to throw off aim. They detailed level bombing defense scatter the formation to minimize damage, but skip bombing combined elements of all three while being none of them. The bombs came in too fast for evasive action, too low for gun depression, too unpredictably for standard countermeasures. Commander Tamechi Hara, one of Japan's most experienced destroyer captains, would later write, "We watched death bounce toward us across the waves. By the time we saw the bomb release, our fate was sealed. 25 seconds to impact. Long enough to know you would die, not long enough to prevent it." The Americans had turned the ocean itself into a weapon. Sergeant Yoshihiro Takahashi, aboard the Teiyo Maru, survived to record his experience. The American planes came so low I could see the pilots' faces. The machine guns never stopped firing. Men were cut down trying to reach anti-aircraft positions. Then came the bombs, skipping toward us like stones across a pond, except these stones weighed 500 pounds. The explosion lifted me off the deck. When I came down, I was in the water, surrounded by drowning men and burning oil. The Australian Beaufighters added another dimension to the attack. These twin-engine fighters preceded each B-25 wave, suppressing anti-aircraft positions with their 4 20mm cannons. Cameraman Damien Perra, aboard one of the Beaufighters, filmed the attack. His footage would become the newsreel "The Bismarck Convoy Smashed," showing the world the devastating efficiency of skip bombing. By noon, half the convoy was gone. The Kyokusei Maru had broken apart after taking multiple skip bomb hits. The Taimei Maru had rolled over, trapping hundreds below decks. The Nojima, trying to avoid incoming bombs, had collided with the destroyer Arashio. Both ships, locked together, became a single massive target for 4 B-25 seconds that delivered 8 skip bombs in a synchronized attack visible from Leh, 80 miles away. The precision required for skip bombing pushed pilots to their absolute limits. Coming in too low meant the bomb wouldn't skip, too high and it would dive instead of bouncing. Too fast and it might skip over the target. Too slow and the bomb would sink on impact. The mathematics were unforgiving, and mistakes were fatal. When anti-aircraft fire found its mark, damaged B-25 seconds cartwheeled into the sea at 200 miles per hour, killing entire crews instantly. That afternoon, 14 more B-25 seconds returned for another attack, claiming 17 hits or near misses. By this time, a third of the transports were sunk or sinking. A 20 Havocs of the 3rd Attack Group and Boston's of No. 22 Squadron RAAF followed. All 7 transports were hit, most burning or sinking about 100 kilometers southeast of Finschhafen, along with the destroyers Shirayuki, Tokitsukaze, and Arashio. The destroyer screen tried desperately to save what they could. The Shikinami, Yukikaze, Uranami, and Asagumo picked up as many survivors as possible before fleeing toward Rabaul. Admiral Kimura's flagship Shirayuki had taken multiple hits. The admiral himself was wounded, machine gun bullets having torn through the bridge, striking him in the shoulder and stomach. He was transferred to the Shikinami as his flagship sank stern first into the Bismarck Sea. Lieutenant General Hidemitsu Nakano, commanding the 51st Division, watched from the destroyer Yukikaze as his veteran troops drowned by the thousands. These men had fought in China, survived earlier campaigns, earned experience that couldn't be replaced. Now they were dying without firing a shot, their rifles and artillery joining them on the ocean floor. The reinforcement meant to save Japanese positions in New Guinea was being annihilated before reaching shore. The technical innovation demonstrated over the Bismarck Sea represented a convergence of American ingenuity and combat necessity. Pre-war experiments at Eglin Field, Florida, had proven skip bombing's theoretical possibility. But it took Pappy Gunn's mechanical genius and General George Kenney's tactical vision to transform theory into lethal practice. Every modified B-25 was a flying testament to American adaptability, the ability to identify a problem, devise a solution, and implement it faster than the enemy could respond. Wing Commander Bill Garing of the Royal Australian Air Force observed, "The Americans hadn't just modified aircraft, they'd revolutionized naval aviation. Traditional torpedo bombers were expensive, vulnerable, and single-purpose. These B-25 seconds could strafe, skip bomb, and fight their way out. They turned medium bombers into universal ship killers." By late afternoon on March 3rd, the convoy had ceased to exist as a fighting force. All 8 transports were sinking or sunk. 4 destroyers had joined them. The Shirayuki went down with most of her crew. The Arashio, locked with the Nojima, burned furiously. The Tokitsukaze, bridge destroyed, circled helplessly until skip bombs found her. The destroyer Asashio had survived the initial attacks, only to be caught by another wave that put multiple skip bombs into her hull. Admiral Kimura, wounded and transferred to the destroyer Shikinami after his flagship sank, ordered the survivors to withdraw. The destroyer Yukikaze carried General Adachi and the remnants of the division staff. The surviving destroyers were packed with approximately 2,700 survivors pulled from the water. They fled north toward Rabaul, leaving thousands more struggling in oil-covered seas. The aftermath revealed war's arithmetic brutality. On March 4th, PT boats from New Guinea bases moved through the wreckage, machine-gunning survivors. The orders were explicit. No enemy troops were to reach shore. PT boats and aircraft strafed lifeboats and life rafts for hours. Every Japanese soldier who didn't reach Leh was one less defender when Allied ground forces attacked. The strategic impact was immediate and irreversible. The Japanese never again attempted to reinforce positions by sea within range of Allied aircraft. The supply line to their New Guinea garrisons was permanently severed. Without reinforcements, without supplies, Japanese positions became untenable. The road to the Philippines opened, paved with wreckage from the Bismarck Sea. General Kenny reported that skip bombing proved effective beyond expectations. The technique allowed medium bombers to attack naval vessels with torpedo-like accuracy at a fraction of the cost. The Japanese Navy no longer controlled waters around New Guinea. The statistics were stark. Allied losses: 4 aircraft, 13 aircrew. Japanese losses: 8 transports, 4 destroyers, approximately 3,000 soldiers and sailors, 15 aircraft shot down. More importantly, the psychological certainty that Japan could not protect its sea lines of communication under Allied air supremacy was established. Captain Toshikazu Omai, staff officer with the Southeast Area Fleet, analyzed the defeat. The Americans discovered our fatal weakness. We prepared for traditional naval combat surface actions, conventional air attacks. Skip bombing was neither, and both simultaneously. It exploited every vulnerability in our defensive doctrine. North American aviation began incorporating Gunn's modifications into production models. The B-25G and B-25 hours came from factories with solid noses packed with guns. By war's end, some B-25 Jules models carried 18 forward-firing machine guns, the most heavily armed aircraft in the American arsenal. The influence of skip bombing extended globally. In the Mediterranean, B-25 seconds used identical tactics against German and Italian shipping. Naval architecture evolved to counter skip bombing additional armor below waterlines, anti-aircraft guns capable of depressing to sea level, new damage control procedures, but no truly effective countermeasure emerged except avoiding Allied aircraft range entirely. The human cost extended beyond numbers. Among the dead were irreplaceable specialists, artillery officers trained in jungle warfare, engineers who understood tropical construction, medical personnel experienced with tropical diseases. The 51st Division's institutional knowledge, accumulated over years of combat, sank with the transports. Sergeant Hiroshi Yamada, one of approximately 1,200 soldiers who reached Leh, recorded morale's collapse. We were promised the Imperial Navy's protection, fighter cover from our aircraft. Instead, we watched our protectors sink alongside us. Americans brought weapons and tactics that made courage meaningless. Bushido couldn't stop skip bombs. Honor couldn't deflect machine gun bullets. We reached Leh not as reinforcements, but as beaten men. Admiral Kimura, recovering from wounds in Rabaul, reported to Imperial General Headquarters. The convoy system is no longer viable in waters controlled by enemy aircraft. Skip bombing makes surface vessels fatally vulnerable. We must find alternatives or abandon forward positions. Tokyo ignored his recommendation, ordering more convoys, more attempts to reinforce isolated garrisons. All would fail. Years later, veterans from both sides would meet at reunions, but none forgot those 25 seconds when death skipped across water, when the ocean became a weapon, when destruction's mathematics rewrote naval warfare rules. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea lasted 3 days but resonated through military history. Colonel Paul Pappy Gunn received the Distinguished Service Cross for his innovations. His modified bombers saved countless American lives by destroying Japanese reinforcements before they reached battlefields. Major Ed Larner, who had led the 90th Squadron so brilliantly in the battle, would die just weeks later on April 30th, 1943, in a flying accident at Dobodura, a reminder that even the best pilots faced danger every day. General Douglas MacArthur called the Battle of the Bismarck Sea the decisive aerial engagement in his theatre. The assessment wasn't hyperbole. The battle proved air power could completely interdict sea communications, that modified medium bombers surpassed specialized naval attack aircraft, that innovation and adaptation were America's greatest weapons. The convoy that departed Rabaul on February 28th, carrying reinforcements to stabilize Japanese positions, had become a submarine graveyard within 72 hours. The 25 seconds between bomb release and impact had changed everything. In the Bismarck Sea, the Pacific War had turned. The modified B-25 seconds hadn't just sunk ships, they'd shattered Japanese strategy, destroyed logistics, and proven American industrial ingenuity could overcome any enemy. 25 seconds. That was all the time Japanese convoy commanders had between seeing bombs released and watching them strike. 25 seconds, when death bounced across waves. 25 seconds that transformed naval warfare forever. 25 seconds that echo through eternity, testament to the terrible efficiency of American innovation and the devastating precision of skip bombing.